A fierce battle erupted deep inside the forest. A royal carriage was suddenly surrounded by a pack of wolves. The knights rushed into formation, doing everything they could to keep the monsters away from the princess. But the fight quickly turned against them. The man in the black suit ordered everyone to fall back. Their defenses were collapsing, and every escape route had already been cut off. Just when the situation looked hopeless, a lone man in a robe appeared. It was Lobelia, the kingdom's most infamous criminal. He calmly scanned the battlefield while the wolves closed in. The knights could only watch in fear, convinced they had nowhere left to run. Then, without hesitation, Lobelia opened his spellbook. A single spell was enough. The knights braced themselves, believing they had become his next target. Instead, an enormous fire spell burst across the battlefield. Infernal circle. A raging wall of flames swallowed every wolf surrounding the carriage. In seconds, the entire pack was reduced to ashes. The explosion was so blinding that several knights instinctively shut their eyes. The rest could only stare in complete disbelief. With the wolves gone, Lobelia turned toward one of the stunned knights, whose shocked expression caught his attention. Nearby, another knight struggled to stay conscious while a wounded soldier questioned whether Lobelia was working with the rebels. Lobelia ignored the accusation. Instead, he pulled out one of his own potions and handed it over, urging the injured knight to drink it without wasting another thought. According to him, it was a secret formula far superior to the kingdom's so-called high-level healing potions. The knight hesitated for only a moment before taking the risk. The effect was immediate. His badly wounded arm regenerated before everyone's eyes. Flesh and skin restored themselves in an instant. The surrounding knights were speechless. An injury that should have been impossible to heal had completely disappeared. Their shock only deepened as they realized the unbelievable level of Lobelia's magic. Then the carriage door opened. The princess stepped outside and walked straight toward him. She sincerely thanked Lobelia for rescuing everyone from certain disaster. But Lobelia showed no interest in the praise. He treated the rescue as nothing more than a way to pass the time. Even so, the princess remained grateful and prepared to offer him a reward. Before she could continue, Julius suddenly stepped in. He immediately stopped the princess, making it clear that she should not make that offer, setting the stage for another unexpected turn. Julius immediately stepped in front of Princess Rian and confronted Lobelia. He demanded to know why he had helped them, referring to him as the infamous arrogant magician. The title alone stunned the other knights. The young knight who had just been healed couldn't believe the mysterious man standing before him was the same criminal everyone feared. Without another word, every knight drew their swords and pointed them at Lobelia. Even after saving their lives, they refused to let someone so dangerous remain anywhere near the princess. Lobelia didn't react. He simply stood there, completely unfazed. Julius quickly escorted Princess Rian back to the carriage, and moments later, the royal convoy continued on its way. The knights marched alongside it until only one young knight remained behind. Before he could leave, Lobelia called him over. The young knight froze, then cautiously turned around. Lobelia calmly warned him to head west instead of following the current route. He explained that their group would eventually reach the town controlled by the Heroes' Knight Guild, and that the guild would naturally take responsibility for protecting the princess. To Lobelia, those knights were predictable. Helping others was the only thing they ever seemed capable of doing. Then he casually placed a hand on the young knight's shoulder. The sudden gesture made the knight tense up. He couldn't understand why Lobelia was sharing such important information. Lobelia leaned in even closer. His expression suddenly turned serious. He made it clear that ignoring the warning would leave the princess as good as dead. After delivering the message, Lobelia stepped back and told the young knight to pass everything directly to the grumpy-looking commander, Julius. The young knight immediately nodded and sprinted toward the carriage without wasting another second. Watching him leave, Lobelia let out a quiet sigh. A faint smile crossed his face as he repeated the nickname Julius had called him, the arrogant magician. He simply scoffed. Meanwhile, inside the moving carriage, Princess Rian finally asked the question that had been on her mind. She couldn't understand why everyone feared Lobelia so much. From everything she had witnessed, he hadn't seemed like an evil person at all. Julius quickly explained. Lobelia Crowley was one of the kingdom's most notorious villains. Although he had graduated at the top of the Magic Academy, he had used his overwhelming talent for his own benefit, leaving destruction wherever he went. Countless people had lost their homes. Many had even lost their lives. To Julius, there was no better title for him than a demon. He firmly warned the princess never to approach Lobelia again. Princess Rian quietly considered his words. If Lobelia truly was a villain, there had been every reason for him to hand her over to the rebels instead of saving her. Doing so would have benefited him far more. Julius admitted that people who devoted themselves to black magic could never be understood, but the princess wasn't convinced. Unlike her tyrannical father, whose cruelty had ultimately led to his death, She had sensed no hatred or malice from Lobelia. He had asked for nothing, expected nothing. His only explanation still echoed in her mind. He had simply helped because he wanted to pass the time. And somehow, that answer only made him even more mysterious. Princess Rian couldn't stop thinking about Lobelia. The more she remembered him, the cooler he seemed. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the carriage window. The young knight had an idea. He suggested heading to the nearby town, where a Heroes' Knight Guild was stationed. If they explained the situation, the legendary order might agree to protect the princess. In his eyes, that was far better than wandering without a plan. Julia stepped over and immediately recognized the guild he was talking about. If it truly was the legendary Heroes' Knight Guild, then they might be able to turn the situation around. The young knight quietly agreed. But he kept one important detail to himself. The idea had come from Lobelia. As the carriage continued moving, he recalled their first encounter. At that moment, he had been certain Lobelia was about to kill them all. Instead, Lobelia had saved every single one of them. Even after having swords pointed at him, he had still worried about their safety and even warned them about the danger ahead. For the first time, the young knight began to question the rumors. Maybe Lobelia wasn't the monster everyone claimed he was. But the truth was even stranger. The man known as Lobelia Crowley had once been an ordinary human. His real name was Sito Arima. He was a 23-year-old part-time worker whose favorite hobby was playing video games. He never imagined that one day he would wake up inside one. Not only that, he had reincarnated as the game's most feared villain. The world was the hit fantasy RPG, Arcadia Fantasy, a massively popular mobile game that constantly dominated the charts. The story followed Reinhard, a seemingly ordinary young man chosen during a sacred ritual to become the world's hero. Blessed with the power of the brave flame, Reinhard was destined to save the world alongside the girl chosen by fate. Despite his average appearance, countless women admired him, making him the unquestioned protagonist of the story. He was trusted by everyone, the perfect hero. Sito, however, had been reborn as his complete opposite. Lobelia Crowley, the most hated villain in the entire game, one of the 12 strongest, a magician who devoted his life to researching the forbidden art of black magic. Beside him rested his experimental journal, filled with records proving he had pushed black magic to its absolute limits. Sitting alone on a stone deep inside a quiet forest, Lobelia struggled to accept his new reality. Why had he become this character of all people? Even speaking in Lobelia's unnatural, arrogant manner felt exhausting. What troubled him even more was something he knew all too well. Lobelia died before the story ended. If he had truly become Lobelia, would that fate become his own? The thought sent a chill through him. He immediately rejected the idea. No matter what happened, he had to avoid that ending at all costs. There was another reason he refused to accept Lobelia's fate. Among every character in Arcadia Fantasy, Lobelia had always been his favorite, more than anyone else. Sito wanted this tragic villain to finally receive the happy ending he never got. After all, players remembered Lobelia not as a simple villain, but as one of the most tragic characters in the entire game. And the reason behind that reputation all began during the Great Human-Demon War. The war that finally brought the endless conflict between humanity and the Demon King's army to an end. Long before he became the feared villain, Lobelia was just a boy born in a small village along the border. It was a dangerous place, caught in the middle of constant conflict. He lived there with his sickly father and his younger sister, Boo. Although they were desperately poor, the three of them still managed to live happily together. Life was never easy. Unable to find steady work, Lobelia often resorted to stealing just to keep his family alive. He hated doing it, but without money, they wouldn't survive. As he walked home, he tried to think of another excuse for his father. He had already claimed to be working at a store. This time, he planned to say he had been helping in the fields. Then he suddenly stopped. Lying face down on the ground was a wounded demon. Anyone else would have left it there. But Lobelia understood pain better than most. Knowing what it meant to suffer, he couldn't abandon someone who needed help. He secretly shared the little food his family had hidden away and helped nurse the demon back to health. The demon was overwhelmed. He had never imagined that a human would show kindness to someone from the demon army. Deeply grateful, he promised never to forget Lobelia's compassion and wished good fortune upon his family before leaving. Lobelia genuinely hoped the demon would live a better life. But fate had something far crueler in store. Without Lobelia ever realizing it, that same wounded demon eventually returned with the demon army. His peaceful village was completely destroyed. The men were slaughtered. The women and children were captured and sold to human slave traders. Lobelia was thrown into an iron cage. Everywhere around him echoed screams of despair. The guilt was unbearable. He blamed himself for everything that had happened. In his mind, the tragedy began the moment he chose to save that demon. He convinced himself that someone like him was never meant to do anything good. Day after day, he remained trapped inside the freezing cage, consumed by guilt so intense that every moment felt like living in hell. Then one day, an opportunity finally appeared. The old shackles binding him gave way, allowing Lobelia to escape. The guards quickly realized what had happened. One of them shouted that a slave had gotten loose. Another furiously blamed his companion for ignoring orders to replace the worn-out restraints. The chase immediately began. They were certain the runaway couldn't have gotten far. While desperately fleeing, young Lobelia accidentally ran into a well-dressed nobleman. The man immediately noticed the iron shackles still attached to the boy's legs. He understood the situation at once. Rather than looking down on him, he pitied him. Believing their encounter was fate, the nobleman gently knelt before Lobelia and rested a hand on his head. That single act of kindness changed his life forever. The noble adopted him as his own son. The Crowley family was a rising noble house that had never been able to have children, and Lobelia became their heir. From that day forward, his life completely changed. To prepare him as the next head of the Crowley family, he received the finest education available. By the age of 12, he had enrolled in the prestigious Grand Chariot Magic Academy. There, Lobelia's talent became impossible to ignore. His grades were nothing short of exceptional. Deep inside the academy's vast library, another student finally found the book he had been searching for. He politely asked to borrow it after Lobelia finished reading. Lobelia answered with nothing but a cold, emotionless stare. As the days passed, his cruelty only grew worse. The child who had survived hell had already shattered beyond repair. His heart could never return to what it once was. Graduation day finally arrived. Lobelia proudly stood before his father after graduating at the top of his class. Reaching that moment had only been possible because of him. But instead of praise, his father focused on something far more important. Grades meant nothing without morality. No matter how brilliant Lobelia had become, the cruel personality that hurt others without hesitation had never changed. And with that, his father rejected him completely, no longer recognizing him as his son. Even the kind-hearted Crowley family had finally reached their limit. The rejection from the person he loved most shattered what little remained of him. Despair consumed his heart. Then everything took an even darker turn. Determined to destroy the world that had betrayed him again and again, Lobelia abandoned all restraint and embraced forbidden dark magic. Eventually, he crossed the final line. He killed a man. But that moment marked the arrival of someone who would change everything. A young swordsman named Reinhard stepped forward as the hero, determined to stop Lobelia once and for all. Standing against the entire hero's knights, Lobelia fought completely alone. The battle raged for 2 days and 2 nights. When it finally ended, Reinhard emerged victorious. According to him, one person could never overcome the strength born from true friendship. He believed this defeat could still become Lobelia's chance to change before it was too late. Those words became the greatest humiliation Lobelia had ever suffered. The very idea of the power of friendship filled him with nothing but contempt. He refused to acknowledge such an absurd belief. From that day forward, he made a single vow. He would hunt Reinhard to the ends of hell and make him experience absolute despair. That obsession consumed his life. Lobelia trained relentlessly, growing stronger with every challenge as he pursued the one opponent he could never defeat. Again and again he faced Reinhard. Again and again he lost. Eventually, the number of defeats became impossible to count. Lobelia eventually joined the very Demon King's army that had destroyed his hometown. But even there, betrayal followed him. The Demon King's executives turned against him and cursed him with a spell that constantly weakened his body. That betrayal led straight to his final battle. The hero, Reinhard, arrived to destroy the Demon King's army, and after a brutal fight, Lobelia finally lost his life. As everything faded away, only one thought remained. If that wasn't a tragedy, then what was? Once his past was revealed after his death, everything changed. The players who once hated Lobelia suddenly saw the truth. The villain everyone despised quickly became the game's most beloved character. But inside the story itself, nothing changed. To Reinhard, Lobelia was still nothing more than absolute evil. No one ever cared enough to uncover the truth behind the man who had become the world's villain. Reliving those memories once again, Lobelia was forced to face the painful reality. His entire life had been filled with betrayal. And in the end, he died without being loved by a single person. As long as he remained this character, there was only one path forward. For Sito Arima, only one goal mattered now. He would earn the recognition of every person in this world. The next day, Lobelia sat alone inside an inn, quietly reading a piece of paper while waiting for his meal. A nervous staff member approached with the final dish and carefully confirmed the order. Lobelia simply acknowledged it. The employee quickly stepped away, still visibly afraid. Even so, Lobelia noticed one small difference. At least this time, no one had thrown him out. Ever since awakening as the infamous villain, every place had been the same. Some people glared at him. Others trembled in fear. And many looked at him with nothing but suspicion. There was only one way to change that. He had to erase his terrible reputation. According to his memories of the game, an important event was approaching. The Dragon King, Boros, ruled over the Kansas territory with overwhelming power, oppressing everyone who lived there. If Lobelia defeated Boros, perhaps people would finally begin to see him differently, even if it was only a little. His decision was immediate. He would free the people from the Dragon King's rule. Good deeds couldn't wait. Tomorrow, he would leave by carriage. Just as his plans were set, a man approached his table. The stranger immediately recognized the infamous magician and claimed to have an interesting proposal. He wanted Lobelia to work with him. Lobelia refused without hesitation. The man mocked the cold response before pointing across the room. Standing there was one of the hero's knights, Claudia. Lobelia recognized her immediately. She was a knight who valued justice above everything else. And among all the characters in the story, she was likely one of the people who hated him the most. The thought raised another possibility. Maybe she had been watching him ever since he entered town. The stranger suddenly lost his patience. Without warning, he splashed his drink directly into Lobelia's face. Lobelia didn't even react. The man then hinted that capturing someone as infamous as Lobelia would surely earn a generous reward. Still, Lobelia remained silent. He simply stood up and walked away. That only encouraged the others. Another man rushed toward him with his fists raised. To them, this looked like the perfect chance to collect a bounty. The punch came flying in. Lobelia slipped past it with ease. At the same time, magical energy gathered in his hand as he considered whether these men truly intended to hand him over to the hero's knights. His eyes shifted toward Claudia. She noticed him watching. The moment their eyes met, Lobelia quietly dismissed the spell before anyone else realized it existed. But the attack wasn't over. One of the men grabbed him from behind. Even so, Lobelia barely cared. This body hardly felt pain anymore. Still, allowing himself to be beaten was another matter entirely. A burst of wind magic exploded outward. The spell instantly broke the man's grip. In the same motion, Lobelia slipped behind the other attacker and struck the back of his neck with perfect precision. The man collapsed immediately. From beginning to end, Claudia watched everything in complete silence. Lobelia couldn't help but sigh. All he wanted was a quiet meal. Instead, he had somehow caused another scene. The patrons quickly began leaving before things escalated any further. They whispered among themselves, wondering who this mysterious man was after watching two attackers fall in an instant. Lobelia simply walked outside. Now he needed to find another place to eat. Using magic to dodge attacks without resisting physically put unnecessary strain on his body. If he kept doing it, he would only make himself sick. Then a sharp voice stopped him in his tracks. Claudia. She had already concluded that he was the man responsible for assaulting the adventurers, and she had no intention of letting him walk away. She demanded to know what he was really planning. Lobelia calmly explained that he had only wanted to eat before being attacked, and that everything afterward had simply been self-defense. But he already knew it wouldn't matter. Someone like Claudia would never believe him. For the first time, she hesitated. Lobelia didn't let the opening pass. He mocked her for rushing to judgment with nothing but assumptions, claiming it only exposed how shallow the hero's knight's training truly was. Claudia refused to argue. She declared that she had no time to waste on someone like him before turning around and leaving. Only after she disappeared did Lobelia finally relax. That had been far too close. He had been certain she was about to draw her sword. If nothing else, he had definitely succeeded in making her even angrier. Maybe it was finally time to do something about his sharp tongue. The following day, fate brought them together once again. Inside a carriage bound for the Kansas territory, Lobelia and Claudia sat side by side in complete silence. Neither of them was willing to speak first. Eventually, Claudia broke the silence and demanded to know why he was on this carriage. Lobelia answered without hesitation. Anyone traveling toward the Kansas territory was either connected to the Dragon King or had business with him. Wanting to defeat the Dragon King was certainly an unusual reason. The comment immediately irritated Claudia. She grabbed him by the collar. Defeating the Dragon King was her mission alone. If someone else accomplished it first, everything she had worked for would lose its meaning. Before the argument could continue, the coachman suddenly called out from the front. The road was completely blocked by a massive pile of fallen boulders. This was as far as the carriage could go. Lobelia stepped down and examined the obstruction. Destroying it with magic would have been easy, but the Dragon King's lair was already nearby. Using that much magical power would expose his location immediately. Without another word, Lobelia leaped over the rocks. A second figure landed beside him. Claudia had followed. Lobelia warned her that turning back would be the smarter choice. Claudia immediately rejected the suggestion. This was her hometown. She didn't need advice from him. As they continued forward, Claudia accused him of lying about his true objective. In her eyes, he wasn't here to defeat the Dragon King at all. She believed he intended to eliminate her instead and joined forces with the Dragon King. Lobelia had no interest in continuing such a pointless argument. He simply walked ahead. But before he could get very far, Claudia suddenly called out to him. Then her footing gave way. The ground beneath her collapsed, sending her over the edge of a cliff. Without thinking, Lobelia reacted instantly. He caught her hand before she could disappear into the abyss. For the first time, Claudia looked at him with genuine shock. The man she believed to be pure evil had just saved her life. With one final pull, Lobelia lifted her safely back onto solid ground. Claudia quietly apologized for what had happened. Lobelia simply told her to be more careful next time before continuing down the path. As he walked ahead, one thought crossed his mind. She had probably sprained her ankle. That night, the two made camp. Lobelia gathered a medicinal herb and carefully ground it into an ointment. Without making a fuss, he treated Claudia's injured ankle. Once he finished, he assured her that it should recover by morning. Then he told her to get some sleep while she still could. He would stand watch through the night. Claudia couldn't hide her confusion. The man sitting before her was nothing like the villain she thought she knew. The Lobelia she had met before had shown neither compassion nor humanity. Lobelia simply admitted that she wasn't wrong. That was the person he used to be. Claudia pointed out that if he were truly still that man, he would have left her to die. Lobelia offered no argument. Instead, she asked what he planned to do after defeating the Dragon King. His answer was simple. He only wanted to measure his own strength. Whether her hometown was saved meant nothing to him. Then she brought up another name, Reinhard. She asked if everything he was doing was simply another step towards surpassing the hero. Lobelia gave her nothing. She was free to believe whatever she wanted. As the conversation faded, his thoughts drifted elsewhere. According to the original game, the Dragon King arc was supposed to unfold very differently. The player was meant to join forces with the Dragon Knight, Zeke, to defeat the Dragon King. Claudia's role had only been a minor one. So why had the story changed? Lobelia turned back toward her. If she was traveling alone, what exactly did she think she could accomplish? Claudia answered without hesitation. She intended to settle this with her own life. This was a personal matter. She refused to involve the hero's knights, and she had no obligation to explain herself. That answer only deepened the mystery. Perhaps Claudia had a story the original game had never revealed. But one thing was certain. No one could defeat the Dragon King alone. Even in the original timeline, it had taken both the protagonist and Dragon Knight Zeke to bring him down. Knowing that, Lobelia couldn't simply let her face the Dragon King by herself. He told Claudia that if she truly wanted to save her homeland, then she should do it herself. As long as she stayed out of his way, he had no complaints. Claudia shot him an irritated look. Even after everything that had happened, his sharp tongue hadn't changed. Lobelia ignored it. He simply told her to stop talking and get some sleep. A few moments later, a quiet voice broke the silence. Claudia thanked him. Lobelia glanced over. She was already asleep. It had only been sleep talking. For a moment, he fell silent. A villain responsible for countless atrocities was never supposed to receive words like that. Not from anyone, and certainly not so easily. The next morning, the journey continued through the Kansas territory. Lobelia recognized the land immediately. Once, it had been the proud stronghold of the hero's knights. Now it was nothing but a wasteland ruled by the Dragon King, Boros. To him, defeating Boros would be simple. He planned to eliminate the tyrant as soon as the opportunity appeared. That same day, the nearby village of Glinta was preparing for its yearly sacrifice to the Dragon King. Security around the village was undoubtedly tighter than ever. Claudia warned against making any reckless moves. Lobelia ignored the warning. Night was when the enemy was most active. Waiting until dawn would give them a much better chance to strike. Hidden inside the bushes, they quietly watched the village. Lobelia noticed 4 men gathered around a single house. Something about the scene felt unusually busy. Then everything changed in an instant. A young girl was dragged outside. One of the men raised his hand, formed a spell, and unleashed it without hesitation. The house exploded. The girl could only watch in horror as her home was reduced to rubble. Claudia immediately recognized her. The attackers mocked the family for trying to let the sacrifice escape. If they had simply handed over their daughter, none of this would have happened. As Toto broke down in tears, Claudia could no longer stand by. She charged forward without a second thought. Lobelia couldn't help noticing the irony. The one who warned against acting recklessly had just rushed into battle herself. In a single burst of speed, Claudia appeared behind the attackers. One clean slash dropped the first man. The remaining goons barely had time to react before panic spread across their faces. Another swift strike ended the fight just as quickly as it had begun. All 4 enemies fell, leaving Toto free. The frightened girl finally realized who had saved her. Claudia had made it. even if she was too late to save the village. There was no time to reunite. The two needed to escape before more enemies arrived. But someone else had already stepped into their path. A horned swordsman calmly approached the battlefield, smiling as he looked over the bodies of his fallen subordinates. The escaped sacrifice was a serious problem, and Claudia would be held responsible. Without hesitation, Claudia lowered her stance and raised her sword. Toto had to get away. The next instant, steel collided with steel. A shower of sparks burst into the air as Claudia's blade crashed against the horned warrior's sword, the impact forcing her backward. She refused to accept a world built on human sacrifices. She intended to destroy that twisted system completely. The horned man simply smiled. He praised her spirit, then unleashed a relentless barrage of sword strikes. Claudia was forced entirely onto the defensive. She searched for an opening and finally launched a counterattack, but it was stopped effortlessly. Their blades locked together once more, and in that brief clash, Claudia realized something terrifying. Her opponent wasn't leaving a single opening. The horned warrior mocked Claudia's strength. Standing in his way with such limited skill only made the fight more entertaining. As a servant of the Dragon King, he claimed that none of her attacks could truly harm him. Then came the final strike. The sheer force sent Claudia's sword flying from her hands. In that instant, she knew death was right in front of her. But even then she refused to accept dying in a place like this. Before the killing blow could land, Lobelia appeared. One punch crashed into the horned man's face. The battle ended instantly. Claudia froze in shock. She never expected Lobelia to step in. She insisted the fight had been hers alone. Lobelia dismissed the idea without a second thought. If her goal was to throw her life away, that was her choice. But he intended to defeat the Dragon King himself. She could stay behind if she wanted. There was something more important now. Lobelia asked why she was still standing there. He had already rescued Toto's parents, and they were waiting. They needed to leave immediately. With several of the Dragon King's servants already dead, retaliation was only a matter of time. Their next destination was obvious: the Dragon King's castle. Meanwhile, inside the throne room, the Dragon King calmly received a report. One of his most important subordinates had fallen. His attendant wasn't surprised. Instead, he simply asked if the Dragon King already understood everything. A faint smile spread across the Dragon King's face. There was no grief. His servants were practically extensions of himself. Kansas was a pleasant land. Its rich forests, peaceful scenery, and simple way of life suited him well. Even the castle was exactly to his liking. Then his smile faded. He ordered Shandy to eliminate the intruders by any means necessary. Shandy bowed and accepted the command without hesitation. Confident in his chosen servants, Shandy believed the invaders had no chance. Even whoever defeated the previous commander couldn't possibly survive such overwhelming numbers. He stepped onto the balcony to watch the battle. Then he stopped cold. The battlefield below had become a wasteland. The earth was scorched and torn apart. The broken bodies of his elite servants were scattered across the ground. Every single one of them was dead. Standing in the middle of the destruction were Claudia and Lobelia. Claudia tightened her grip on her sword as she looked over the unbelievable scene. Lobelia barely seemed impressed. To him, the entire battle had been nothing more than a waste of time. Shandy couldn't believe his eyes. The impossible had happened. His strongest servants had all been wiped out. Then Lobelia slowly turned toward the balcony. Before their eyes could meet, Shandy disappeared. Claudia asked what had happened. Lobelia simply brushed it off. Nothing. At that very moment, Shandy raced back into the throne room. His composure was gone as he urgently reported the disaster unfolding outside the castle. The Dragon King immediately noticed his distress. Shandy admitted that the enemies were far more troublesome than expected. He tried to explain what had happened, but before he could finish, the Dragon King calmly cut him off. There was no need for excuses. Shandy should have already dealt with the problem. The Dragon King looked at Shandy with quiet disappointment. He reminded him of everything they had been through. Shandy had been the sole survivor after his entire clan was wiped out, and Boros had guided him ever since. Out of everyone in the kingdom, he had trusted Shandy the most. And yet, that trust had been betrayed. Shandy immediately dropped to his knees, desperately begging for forgiveness. Boros slowly brought his hands together. The moment they met, Shandy's body was crushed instantly. There was nothing left to say. Boros simply admitted that he was disappointed. Then the throne room doors shook violently. A deafening impact echoed through the castle. The massive entrance exploded apart. Lobelia and Claudia stepped inside. Boros remained perfectly calm. So these were the troublesome guests. Their manners were certainly lacking, but they were still welcome inside his castle. He introduced himself as Boros, the Dragon King. Although he had just lost an excellent subordinate, perhaps this was the perfect chance to replace him. Boros offered both of them a place at his side. A powerful mage like Lobelia was exactly the kind of servant he wanted. Lobelia rejected the offer without hesitation. Boros only smiled. That answer came rather quickly. If Lobelia wasn't seeking power, then why challenge him? Was he planning to take Kansas for himself? Lobelia gave a simple answer. He had come to free Kansas. Claudia quietly glanced toward him. Boros sighed. What a troublesome goal. He warned Lobelia to stop struggling against the inevitable. Even a fool should understand the difference between humans and dragons. A shadow spread beneath his feet. From the darkness, his sword emerged. There would never be a fair fight. Without another word, Boros swung. Lobelia instantly cast a barrier. The shield absorbed the attack, but the overwhelming force still hurled him backward. Just one swing carried unbelievable power. Before Lobelia could recover, Boros was already standing in front of him. His sword pointed straight at Lobelia's throat. Boros admitted that Lobelia was stronger than any human he had met in Kansas. Lobelia remained unfazed. The weakest were always the loudest. For the first time, Boros's smile faded. Then everything happened at once. Lobelia suddenly grabbed the Dragon King's blade. A crack spread across its surface. Boros stared in complete disbelief. This was supposed to be one of the strongest swords in the world. Before he could even finish the thought, Claudia seized the opportunity. She drove her sword straight through Boros's head. The throne room fell silent, but Boros didn't even flinch. Instead, he casually remarked that this was unfortunate. He had planned to take his time with her later. Lobelia and Claudia immediately realized something was terribly wrong. That attack should have killed him. Claudia pulled her sword free and attacked again. Another strike. Then another. None of them left so much as a scratch. Boros calmly raised his own blade. If she was that eager, then she could die right now. Lobelia immediately sensed the danger. Without hesitating, he cast shock, using wind magic to blast Claudia out of the attack's path. The spell saved her life, but it also launched her straight into a nearby pillar. She slammed into the stone and lost consciousness. Lobelia clicked his tongue. He had overdone it. He forgot Claudia was far lighter than he was. Boros immediately recognized the spell. Wind magic. Used not to attack, but to save an ally. His interest in Lobelia only grew stronger. Perhaps he was a famous magician after all. Lobelia reached into his belongings and pulled out a spellbook. Even Boros couldn't hide his curiosity. A spellbook that rare was something even royal court mages rarely possessed. Its dark, ominous cover made it even more unusual. Could it be dark magic? Lobelia admitted that Boros had guessed correctly. He would see the answer soon enough. Jet black spears burst into existence and shot across the throne room. Boros reacted instantly. His sword blurred through the air, knocking every spear aside with flawless precision. Then he rushed forward. The distance between them disappeared in an instant. His blade came down with lethal force. Lobelia fired shock beneath his own feet. The burst of wind propelled him away just in time, narrowly avoiding the Dragon King's devastating strike. Boros refused to give Lobelia a moment to breathe. He unleashed a relentless barrage of sword strikes. Each swing was fast enough to kill, yet every single one missed. Lobelia slipped through the assault with perfect timing. Another sweeping slash came from the side. Lobelia leaped over it. As he landed, dark chains burst from the ground and wrapped tightly around Boros. The binding spell locked the Dragon King in place. Boros admitted it was a clever trick. Then with raw strength alone, he shattered the chains. The broken links scattered across the floor. A grin spread across his face. Lobelia finally understood. Boros was even stronger than he had expected. Without wasting another second, Lobelia raised his hands toward the sky. Dark clouds gathered above the castle. A massive bolt of lightning tore through the heavens. It crashed directly into Boros. The explosion engulfed the throne room. The Dragon King had been caught completely off guard. When the smoke cleared, Boros was badly wounded. For a moment, it looked like the attack had finally worked. Lobelia immediately turned toward Claudia. She was still unconscious. He rushed over and urged her to wake up. Then a voice echoed behind him. Boros was standing again. He admitted that no one had overwhelmed him like this before. Lobelia stared in disbelief. That attack should have ended the battle. Something wasn't right. A dark substance began spreading across Boros's body. His appearance started to change. He had finally decided to get serious. Even Boros acknowledged Lobelia's strength. Then the transformation was complete. His human form disappeared. A massive dragon stood before them. Dragon Boros. No warrior had forced him into this form for over 500 years. But no matter how talented a mage was, the true power of the dragon race could never be surpassed. Lobelia wasn't impressed. He had no intention of losing. Then he mocked the enormous dragon. What do you call someone with a giant body? And a tiny spirit? A small fry. Dragon Boros dismissed the insult. Lobelia still had enough energy to joke. The real question was how much longer that confidence would last. The enormous dragon slammed a foot toward him. The floor exploded on impact. But Lobelia had already escaped. He immediately cast disaster. A violent whirlwind erupted around Boros. Moments later, roaring flames crashed into the storm, chaining one spell into the next. The attack finally left several wounds across the Dragon King's body. Lobelia watched carefully. Something about Boros had changed. Instead of rushing in, he decided to observe a little longer. Meanwhile, Claudia remained unconscious. A familiar voice gently called her name. Her surroundings slowly changed. She found herself sitting at a dining table. Her mother reminded her to put her book away before eating. Her father laughed. She had been reading the very same story again. But to Claudia, that book was more than just a story. It was her dream. After finishing her meal, she eagerly asked if she could go outside and play. Her mother smiled and agreed, reminding her to stay safe. Ever since she was little, Claudia had admired the legendary female knight who wielded the holy sword, Reincarnated, the hero who had saved countless innocent lives. She wanted to become someone just like her. Growing up in the countryside, Claudia trained with a sword however she could. Her parents never discouraged her. They supported her dream every step of the way. The memories shifted again. Now she was surrounded by her childhood friends. Monica excitedly talked about their exploration into the nearby forest. Another friend teased her for getting scolded by her parents again. Claudia couldn't help smiling. Monica never seemed to learn. Monica simply laughed it off. After all, Claudia would protect everyone if monsters appeared. She even claimed they were practically sisters. Claudia proudly declared herself the oldest. Monica immediately questioned that logic. The others burst into laughter. To them it made perfect sense. Monica was always the most childish one of the group. Monica always teased Claudia like an older sister. But beneath it all, she believed in her more than anyone. Claudia dreamed of becoming a knight one day. But that dream meant leaving her village behind. And no matter how badly she wanted to grow stronger, she couldn't bear the thought of leaving the two friends who meant everything to her. Then everything changed. The Dragon King seized the village without warning. The people lost everything they had. Anyone who fought back was executed. Even the legendary knight's castle deep in the forest was turned into the Dragon King's fortress. And the nightmare only got worse. Every year, the villagers were forced to offer young girls as sacrifices. The first victim was Monica. Even while being dragged away, Monica never gave up hope. She placed all her faith in Claudia, believing that one day she would become strong enough to save everyone. A year later, it was Claudia's turn. Knowing what was coming, her parents secretly dug a tunnel beneath their house. It was just large enough for a child to crawl through unnoticed. Claudia refused to leave them behind. She wanted the whole family to escape together. But there was no way. The tunnel was too small for adults. Her parents only wished for one thing, that their daughter would survive. Before sending her away, her father entrusted Claudia with his sword. It became the final gift she would ever receive from him, along with one last hope, that she would reach the royal capital and become the great knight they always believed she could be. With tears streaming down her face, Claudia embraced her parents one last time. She had admired the legendary female knight and the holy sword Reincarnated for as long as she could remember. But that day, she abandoned her friends, her family, and the home she loved. Ever since then, she carried only one thought. She was nothing more than a coward. Suddenly, the painful memory faded. Claudia slowly opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was Lobelia standing against the Dragon King. Even while fighting, he had kept a magical barrier around her the entire time she was unconscious. At that moment, everything finally became clear. She had always believed that facing the Dragon King alone, even if it meant certain death, was the only way to atone for running away. But now, she wasn't alone anymore. With Lobelia fighting beside her, defeating Boros and restoring peace to the village had become her true path to redemption. Meanwhile, Dragon Boros acknowledged Lobelia's incredible endurance. The battle had dragged on long enough. It was time to end it. The Dragon King unleashed his ultimate technique, Dragon's Tear. A gigantic sphere of blazing fire gathered inside his mouth, growing larger with every passing second. Lobelia calmly prepared himself for the devastating attack. But before either of them could move, Claudia burst forward. She gripped her father's sword with everything she had, sprinted straight at the Dragon King, and leaped into the air. Both Boros and Lobelia turned toward her. Carrying the hopes of her parents and Monica, she poured every ounce of strength into a single strike. The blade crashed directly into Boros' head. The Dragon King let out a deafening roar of pain. The impact sent Claudia falling through the air. Before she could hit the ground, Lobelia caught her without hesitation. Claudia urged him to finish what she had started. Lobelia already understood. Now all that remained was to end the battle. Lobelia could tell the battle had finally taken its toll. Boros was beginning to slow down. But that alone wasn't enough. The dragon race was feared for a reason. Their blood possessed an overwhelming regenerative ability. No ordinary attack could keep them down. Lobelia quickly reached the only conclusion that mattered. To defeat Boros, he needed a single strike powerful enough to overwhelm the Dragon King's healing completely. There would be no second chance. He quietly began chanting. He called upon the Gate of Fear, a place where imaginary beasts ran wild, a realm forever hungry for blood and flesh. And with the incantation complete, Lobelia declared that Boros' reign would end here. A colossal gate from a fictional hell burst into existence behind the Dragon King. Its surface was covered with countless eyes, all staring with cold, unsettling silence. Chains erupted from the darkness, wrapping tightly around Boros before he could escape. The Dragon King struggled with all his might, but it was useless. The chains dragged him toward the enormous gate. Slowly, relentlessly, Boros disappeared into the darkness. Then the gate slammed shut. The massive lock clicked into place. Silence returned to the battlefield. Lobelia and Claudia stood there, staring at the mysterious gate. Neither of them knew where it led. But one thing was certain. The Dragon King was gone. Back in the village of Kansas, the people gathered after the battle. Instead of celebrating, whispers of fear spread through the crowd. Many believed the strange roar and the dark phenomenon in the sky had been caused by forbidden black magic. Some even feared that Lobelia himself would become the village's next disaster. The insults continued without end. Lobelia remained expressionless. But deep inside, he realized he was never truly welcome there. Returning to the village had been meaningless. Before he could walk away, Claudia stepped forward. Her fists trembled with anger. She couldn't stay silent any longer. She condemned the villagers for their shameful behavior. The very first words they offered their savior had been accusations instead of gratitude. She reminded everyone that Lobelia was the one who had freed them from the Dragon King's tyranny. Even she, despite all her determination, could never have defeated Boros alone. The crowd fell silent. Toto hurried over and gently tried to calm Claudia before apologizing to Lobelia. Everyone understood what he had done. They were simply overwhelmed by fear. Lobelia accepted the apology without hesitation. He never fought the Dragon King for praise, nor for rewards, nor for recognition. As he prepared to leave, Claudia wiped away her tears. With heartfelt gratitude, she thanked him for saving them. The villagers followed her example. Words of thanks finally echoed across the village. Lobelia never looked back. He simply raised one hand in farewell and continued walking toward the horizon. A few days later, at the headquarters of the Heroic Knight Order, a staff member delivered a letter to Reinhard. It was from Claudia. As he read through it, one detail immediately caught his attention. The one who defeated the Dragon King was Lobelia. Reinhard was left completely stunned. Not far away, an unknown girl happened to overhear the conversation. The moment she learned Lobelia's name, a bright smile spread across her face. He had saved someone once again. After leaving the village behind, Lobelia crossed a long bridge and entered a new country. His next objective was simple. He needed to build a good reputation by helping people in need. Unfortunately, reality had other plans. His notorious reputation, combined with his blunt personality, made even simple conversations nearly impossible. Every attempt to offer help ended in rejection. Then, out of nowhere, an unexpected opportunity appeared. A young woman rushed over, clinging to him while desperately asking for food. Lobelia immediately saw a chance to improve his image. He handed her some dried meat. The woman happily accepted it and devoured the meal without hesitation. Watching her eat, Lobelia realized he didn't recognize her from the game. Still, earning the favor of the beastmen couldn't hurt. Once she finished eating, Lobelia casually asked for her name. The woman proudly introduced herself. She claimed to be Reincarnated, the daughter of the beastmen tribe's leader. The moment Lobelia heard that name, he immediately decided to leave. As he turned around, Radia quickly chased after him, demanding to know why he was walking away. Lobelia knew exactly who she was. The current beastmen chief was Reincarnated, and Radia was the tribe's princess. She was infamous for her selfish personality and had run away from the strict rules imposed by both her father and her people. Even worse, in the original game, once Radia inherited leadership of the tribe, she started a massive war against humanity. Getting involved with someone like her was the last thing Lobelia wanted. People already viewed him as a villain. If he stayed by her side, everyone would assume they were allies. The smartest choice would be to capture her and hand her back to the beastmen. There was nothing to gain from helping her. Realizing he was leaving, Radia desperately tried another approach. She insisted on giving him a reward for helping her. Curious, Lobelia asked what she meant. Her answer left him completely speechless. She proudly offered to become his wife. Without a second thought, Lobelia rejected the proposal. But Radia refused to give up. She confidently declared that she had already fallen for him and insisted that anyone should feel honored by such an offer. Lobelia remained completely unmoved. Even after Rydia proudly boasted about her figure, he simply called her a foolish cat and told her to go home. Instead of giving up, she moved even closer. If becoming his wife was impossible, then she was willing to stay by his side even as a pet. Her persistence finally pushed Lobelia over the edge. He firmly told her that he had no time to waste on someone who had created all of her own problems. The sudden outburst shocked Rydia. Moments later, she collapsed. Lobelia immediately checked her condition. Her forehead was burning with fever. After wandering around without any real plan, it was no surprise her body had finally given out. Even so, she really was a troublesome fool. Lobelia prepared a warm bowl of egg porridge. Before long, Rydia slowly opened her eyes. The aroma reached her first. Her eyes immediately lit up the moment she saw the food. Lobelia simply told her to eat before it got cold. Rydia happily dug in. After one bite, she couldn't hide her excitement. The simple egg porridge tasted better than anything she had expected. As she enjoyed every spoonful, she once again decided that Lobelia was destined to become her mate. Just imagining herself eating meals like this every day filled her with happiness. Lobelia quickly shut that idea down. Taking care of a spoiled brat was the last thing he wanted. Now that her fever had started to subside, it was time for her to return home. But Rydia refused. She insisted that she still had someone she needed to find. Hearing that, Lobelia couldn't help but wonder, had she really run away because she hated her home? Or was there another reason behind her escape? Lobelia couldn't ignore one possibility. Since he had defeated the Dragon King instead of the heroic knights, the future was already changing. If Rydia now had a purpose that never existed in the original game, then helping her might actually benefit him. When he asked who she wanted to meet, Rydia revealed the name, Rachel, a young girl studying magic under someone named Noah. Rydia explained that once she inherited leadership of the Beastmen tribe, tradition would forbid her from ever leaving the forest again. This would be her last chance to see her friend. Before she could even finish explaining, Lobelia made his decision. He would take her there. But there was one condition. When Rydia eventually became the tribe's leader, she would have to grant him a favor in return. If she agreed, their deal was settled. Rydia happily accepted and immediately threw her arms around him in excitement. Lobelia pushed her away without hesitation. Her constant clinging was becoming more annoying than endearing. He then asked the question that actually mattered. Were they being chased? After a brief pause, Rydia admitted that 2 members of the heroic knights were already pursuing them. Not far away, the pursuers had already found their targets. One was a woman named Zordia. She suggested launching a surprise attack to eliminate them immediately. Her partner, Jake, shut that idea down. Their mission wasn't assassination. They had been ordered to bring the Beastmen princess back alive. If they killed her escort and escalated the situation, war between humans and Beastmen would become inevitable. Before they could decide their next move, Lobelia made the first move instead. He lifted Rydia into his arms. Then both of them rose high above the trees. Jake and Zordia looked up in disbelief. Lobelia mocked them for reacting too slowly as they soared through the sky. But the escape didn't last long. Rydia suddenly spotted danger approaching from behind. A volley of arrows raced toward them. Without wasting a second, Lobelia cast Breath of the Flame Spirit. A ring of blazing fire formed around the incoming arrows. The entire barrage exploded in midair before a single shot could reach them. Watching the attack fail, Zordia complained that the fight was becoming unfair. Jake admitted he never expected Lobelia to destroy every arrow so effortlessly. After thinking it over, he decided they should head to the landing site instead. As long as the princess survived, the mission could still be completed. Meanwhile, Lobelia was already waiting for them. Jake jokingly remarked that he had never imagined the infamous arrogant mage would end up serving as someone's bodyguard. Zordia immediately asked for permission to kill him. Jake refused. He would provide cover from a distance while she handled the front lines. Confidently, Zordia charged straight at Lobelia. He barely moved. Instead of counterattacking, he casually blocked her strike with his arm. Jake fired another arrow from behind. Lobelia effortlessly raised a magical shield, stopping that attack as well. Even Zordia's follow-up blows couldn't break through. Growing frustrated, she questioned why he wasn't fighting back. Lobelia calmly answered, he wanted to talk. Zordia couldn't believe what she was hearing. From her perspective, he was nothing more than a criminal helping a runaway princess. Or worse, a kidnapper. Jake quickly stopped her from jumping to conclusions. Something felt strange. Lobelia had every opportunity to attack, yet he still hadn't made a single offensive move. Lobelia assured them that he had no intention of being their enemy. Naturally, they demanded proof. His answer was as blunt as ever. If he truly wanted them dead, they would already be dead. Jake couldn't deny that possibility. Still, Helping the Beastman princess escape required a reason, so he asked the question directly. Why was Lobelia doing this? The answer couldn't have been simpler. He only wanted Rydia to see her friend one last time. Jake and Zordia stared at him in confusion. Lobelia believed the heroic knights were reasonable people. If he explained the truth honestly, surely they would understand. Instead, both of them immediately suspected he was lying. Lobelia's patience finally began to wear thin. There was no point continuing the conversation. He only needed to stall until Rydia escaped deeper into the forest. Jake raised his bow. Zordia tightened her grip on her weapon. The fight was about to begin. Someone came charging out of nowhere. It was Rydia. Without slowing down, she launched herself through the air and delivered a devastating dropkick straight into Jake's face and sent him crashing to the ground. She looked completely satisfied. To her, that was all a lowly human was worth. Lobelia immediately scolded her reckless behavior. At the same time, Zordia noticed one of her own men lying on the ground. Confusion turned into rage in an instant. Without hesitation, she charged straight at Rydia. The sudden attack caught the princess completely off guard. Rydia barely escaped, then proudly mocked Zordia, claiming that a mere human could never land a hit on her. That only made things worse. Zordia completely lost her temper. Then she did something that stunned everyone. She bit her own finger until it bled. Even Lobelia froze. Rydia could only watch in shock. Zordia had activated Berserk mode. This was a limiter release that allowed her scythe to absorb its owner's blood. Once activated, she no longer recognized allies or enemies. Everything in sight became a target. The moment her face darkened, Lobelia knew exactly what was coming. He grabbed Rydia and took off just as Zordia's attack tore through the spot where they had been standing. They escaped by only a split second. While flying away, Lobelia couldn't hold back his frustration. He had already warned Rydia to run. Instead, her pride had nearly gotten both of them killed. Rydia refused to back down. She couldn't accept abandoning the man she believed was her husband. Lobelia immediately crushed that idea, leaving her speechless for a moment. But their escape wasn't over yet. Zordia was already chasing them. Once Berserk mode was activated, there was no stopping her. Lobelia didn't want to fight someone from the heroic knight order, but he had no choice. He unleashed ominous chains, hoping to restrain her. The chains snapped apart instantly. Even Lobelia couldn't believe it. A second later, Zordia lunged again. Then out of nowhere, someone slammed into her with enough force to send her crashing to the ground. Lobelia looked over in surprise. It was Jake. Despite taking that devastating kick earlier, he was already back on his feet. He urged them to leave immediately. Reinforcements would arrive soon, and if they stayed any longer, they would all be captured. Lobelia couldn't understand it. Jake's mission had been to bring Rydia back. But everything had changed. If the battle continued, even the princess would end up dying at Zordia's hands. Jake decided to stay behind and buy them time. Lobelia accepted the sacrifice with sincere gratitude. Even he was surprised by how honestly those feelings came out. As they prepared to leave, Jake had one final request. He hoped Rydia would one day reunite with the friend she had been searching for. Lobelia carried Rydia as they traveled deeper into the forest. After a long silence, Rydia finally apologized. Lobelia didn't blame her. She was still young and inexperienced. Mistakes were unavoidable. Rydia immediately insisted that she would never make another one. But Lobelia knew better. As long as someone was alive, they would keep making mistakes. The important part wasn't avoiding failure. It was getting back up every single time, even if the struggle was ugly, even if it hurt. Those countless efforts would eventually. His thoughts suddenly stopped. For some reason, those words felt strangely familiar. Rydia noticed his expression and asked what was wrong. Lobelia brushed it off. Still, that voice in his mind sounded oddly familiar. It couldn't be. This body belonged to him now. There was no reason to dwell on it. Pushing the thought aside, they continued through the forest. Before long, they arrived at a beautiful field. The Hill of Flowers. A young woman was quietly waiting there. Hearing footsteps, she turned toward the sound. The moment Rydia called out to her, both girls lit up with excitement. They rushed toward each other and shared a heartfelt embrace after their long separation. The woman introduced herself as Rachel before turning her attention to Lobelia. Curious, she asked who he was. Rydia admitted she didn't even know his name. Lobelia simply introduced himself as a nameless traveling companion. That answer didn't seem to bother Rachel at all. She thanked him for bringing her friend back safely. Then she noticed his outfit. It looked exactly like a magician's robe. Lobelia confirmed her suspicion. But before he could explain anything else, Rachel excitedly interrupted him. She had never met another magician besides her own master. Unable to contain her curiosity, she eagerly asked if he could cast a spell, especially with the mysterious crow by his side. Lobelia quickly realized something important. Rachel had no idea who he really was. If that was the case, using a simple spell should be harmless. Just as he was about to respond, a man's voice echoed across the hill. He called out to Rachel, worried after hearing someone crying earlier. But the moment he saw Lobelia, he froze. Lobelia's heart skipped a beat. Had this man recognized him? Instead, the man's eyes sparkled with excitement. His attention wasn't on Lobelia at all. It was locked onto the spellbook in his hands. Unable to hide his excitement, he politely begged for a closer look. He apologized repeatedly, explaining that it was his first time seeing a genuine spellbook and that he desperately wanted to hold one, even for a moment. Lobelia let out an irritated sigh. Out of sheer pity, he handed the spellbook over. The man's face instantly filled with joy as he gratefully accepted the priceless treasure. The man smiled and invited everyone inside. Standing around outside wasn't the best place to talk. A few moments later, they were sitting together with warm tea in front of them. The welcome was far kinder than Lobelia had expected. Curious, the master tried opening Lobelia's spellbook. Nothing happened. Lobelia calmly explained that the book only revealed its contents to the person it had chosen. The master's excitement instantly faded. He had hoped this would finally be his chance to read a real spellbook. Rachel gently comforted him. She was sure he'd be chosen someday. Hearing that was enough for the master to smile and accept his disappointment. It was also his first time meeting Radia, the princess of the Beastmen. Radia thanked him for always looking after her friend. The master humbly denied deserving the praise. If anything, he believed Rachel was the one constantly taking care of him. Then Radia revealed the real reason for her visit. She had brought a secret medicine from the Beastmen tribe. The master's eyes widened in disbelief. Lately, he had been suffering from magical power depletion. It was a condition caused by excessive use of magic, allowing magical energy to leak from the body. The Beastmen possessed a rare treatment that could suppress it. For the master, it was an incredible gift. Watching the exchange, Lobelia quietly realized something. Despite her pride and reckless attitude, Radia also had a genuinely kind side. She had traveled all this way just to help someone in need. Rachel smiled with relief. With the medicine, her master's workload would finally become lighter. But the master admitted he would still be happiest if Rachel continued helping him. Radia immediately teased him for being a hopeless master. Rachel could only laugh and agree. The peaceful reunion couldn't last forever. Lobelia stood up. It was time to leave. Radia looked surprised that they were already going. The master offered to let them rest longer after such a long journey, but Lobelia firmly refused. They were being hunted. Anyone who sheltered them could easily be accused of helping fugitives. If they truly cared about their own safety, it was better not to get involved. Just as they were about to leave, the master stopped them. He had one final gift. He handed Lobelia a small box. Inside were 2 beautiful rings. Lobelia immediately recognized them. An engagement ring. Radia stared at the gift in complete shock. She couldn't understand how the master already knew about their supposed marriage. Even Rachel looked surprised by the unexpected news. The master simply smiled. It wasn't a coincidence. The rings were magical items. Lobelia questioned why someone who understood their value would casually give them away. The master explained his reason. Rachel had been heartbroken because she couldn't see her dear friend. Thanks to Lobelia, she was finally smiling again. On top of that, he had fulfilled a lifelong dream by holding a genuine spellbook. No ordinary gift could repay that kindness. Hearing his sincere gratitude, Lobelia accepted the rings. With everything settled, the two prepared to continue their journey. The master wished them good fortune on the road ahead. Rachel reminded them to stay safe. Radia thanked them both one last time before the pair disappeared back into the forest.